Welcome, gang. What is it? What is this? Tuesday, what? August 13th? What? Oh, it's already the year's over. The year's over. Our lives are over. It goes by that fast. Come on in. I'm going to take your comments. We're doing a thing. We can talk about whatever you want. I recently put out a couple videos on my experience with COVID. We could talk about that. We could talk about your experience with COVID. We could talk about nothing related to COVID. Anything you want. Ashley's here. Rosalino's here. These are supporters of the show. $5 a month. You're in our fam. And you keep the lights on, and we have these great conversations. I miss you too, Rose. So what else is new? Finally, no more COVID symptoms that I can tell. Still get a little tired once in a while, but it's overall pretty much gone. And man, that one really sucked. Oh, because there was so much of the, I did the video on this biopsychosocial component of it where you're just like, am I dying? Like, what's even going on here? So yeah, weigh in the comments. Thanks, Pack, or Evan, I should say. Sarah's here. Healthcare at home, says Matt Maj. I mean, this has been a thing that has been talked about forever. And in the Illuminati circles of the healthcare elite, where I used to roll around thinking I was a thing. And then I was rapidly disabused of that because I realized no one is a thing. No one knows what the fuck is going on in healthcare. And anyone who tells you that they do, they may know what's going on in healthcare 10 years ago. But nobody really knows what's going on because it's such a juggernaut. It's so beyond in any individual at this point. It's this huge, massive machine that is only going to change when I think enough people generally wake up and institutions start to just, by no choice of their own, have to shift their strategy of how they pay for things, what they're doing, all this doing stuff to people instead of for people. I'm rapidly becoming a medical nihilist where I just really am suspicious of anything that we do that hasn't really been studied incredibly thoroughly, because so much of it is here, so much of it is social. The physical stuff we kind of understand, but not really. And even that's a reflection of something even deeper than that. So it's kind of like, what? Is there a COVID wrap coming? So, sorry, healthcare at home. Yes. Right? It's just like hospice at home, end of life care. I really I was listening to this video by this guy, Ram Dass, who, AKA Richard Alpers, old school, compatriot of Tim Leary's, did a bunch of acid in the 60s, went to India, went down the whole enlightenment awakening journey, and came back and started working with healthcare workers, started working with people who were dying of AIDS. This was in the 80s and 90s. And he was saying hospice is one thing to accept that death is not a failure in Western medicine, but it's another thing to use it as an opportunity for actual spiritual growth. Observing your own dying is a huge step to disidentifying from I am the body and more deeply understanding what our true nature is. So, Project Daydreams says biopsychosocial effects of cancer is that of COVID on steroids. Can you imagine? You're given a diagnosis. You're now terrified for your life. Everything you've heard about cancer all your life is not good. There's all this sort of social conditioning around cancer. We don't even talk about it. We call it the C word sometimes. And, oh, hell yeah, it's going to affect your experience of having the condition of the disease and of your own ability to heal, your own ability to cope with the stress of it, your own ability to modulate pain and discomfort and nausea and the kind of things that come with the treatments and the disease itself. So why don't we talk more about this? I mean, I think we give it lip service, but we don't really know what to do because we're not paid to do it. We're not trained to do it. We're trained to we're a hammer and everything's a nail, right? And so it's chemotherapy. It's the stuff we do for cancer, surgery, but we don't really treat the whole biopsychosocial condition. And so people suffer a lot more than they need to suffer, a lot more. And we make death the enemy. We make it this big battle. Well, it's well, what if it was just okay, this is another aspect of life that's showing up. Maybe I'll survive it. I'll do the things, but setting up this like failure condition where, oh, I didn't survive it. Well, somehow I'm to blame, or somehow the system has failed. I don't think that helps. In fact, I think it's the opposite. And the older I get, the closer I get to my own death. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And I've had experiences where I've sort of experienced this kind of death, at least the trail run, right? Whether it's meditation or psychedelics or whatever. And I tell you, it's not what we think. It's not what we can think. So I don't know. In Western culture, we really need to start letting go of this fixation we have on preventing death at all costs, and instead just looking at how do we live? How do we live the best life that we can? Joy says, I'm dying from glioblastoma. Don't have long. I want to know how to help myself go through this easily. What a journey that you're on. And my heart just feels that connection with you because you're so open about this. I don't have long. How can I go through this more easily? Like, what a question. What a beautiful question that many people don't get to ask. So, of course, I don't have an answer for you, right? Because my experience isn't yours. But with that attunement to the question, and even how do I go through this more easily, we can look inside and go, okay, so what are my feelings about this? Because they're so conditioned, right? By everything you see on TV, everything you've heard about glioblastoma, brain tumors, end of life, all of these things. We're conditioned to think this is going to be very hard and incredibly painful and all the things that we hear, or it's, again, it's a failure, so on. But what if it's more living, more life experience? And if you're surrounded by people who support you, who love you, if you're living life fully in the moment as much as you can, as much as it's possible when there's pain and there's nausea and there's neurologic symptoms. I recently had an experience, and it wasn't with cancer. It wasn't with those sort of things, but it was with, it was a psychedelic medicine that made me feel like I was dying physically. And it occurred to me during this experience that, this intense discomfort, this intense physical suffering must be what it's like to be on chemotherapy at the end of life with no hope that it's going to get better. That's how it felt. That's how bad it felt. And when my mind was formulating this as a physical problem, like I'm being tortured here, like it was true suffering, like just horrible. Then something clicked where it was like, wait, but what if this is just more experience? It's happening right now. It's energy. There's no story associated with it. It's just energy. And suddenly these intense pains, discomfort, nausea modulated into this energetic experience. And it then would open and release. And then the next experience would happen. And suddenly my experience wasn't one of suffering. It was one of experience. And then what if we started in that process? Like if we know we don't have a lot of time, what if we start going through and going, okay, so what are the things here now that are arising that I want to resolve? That maybe there's trauma, maybe there's a relationship, maybe there's a relationship with yourself, coming to peace with certain aspects. And this is where palliative care, hospice, these people are trained to help hold space for that. But maybe there's a spiritual aspect too, right? That we ignore. This is a chance, actually, one of the deepest chances to wake up in this life to what we are and experience this thing that everybody's going to experience, but experience it fully conscious So in a sense, then this twist that life has given you, this glioblastoma, becomes this opportunity. I mean, I would never call cancer a gift, but it is an opportunity to look so deeply into this moment, because really there's no other choice. Where can you go? It's here. And that's what that medicine taught me. It was just like, why are you even doing this? Why are you even looking, seeking, searching? What you seek is always and already this moment, unfolding now with its good, its bad, and its ugly. There's nowhere else. You know, there may be some other experiences, but they're just experiences. They're not for us. What's for us is this. I know it's not a satisfying answer, right? Because it's not an answer. I'm just feeling through it with you. I wish you peace and comfort and discovery during this. Yeah, Rose lost her dad to the same thing. Nancy says nothing to fear. Here's what I want to say about that. There is a realization actually in this whole journey that there is nothing to fear. Everything is perfectly okay on the deepest level. However, it is really true. Like everything is well. All is well. I'll say it again. All is well. However, we are in the human manifestation, which means there will be existential terror. There will be the fear of loss. There will be the fear of death. There will be the fear of loved ones going without you. There will be the fear of you going without loved ones. Oh, how beautiful. It's okay. That fear is the gift of love. It's the gift of the love for this life that could easily be nothing. This whole manifestation could be nothing, easily, energetically. It's so easy for it to be pure emptiness, pure potential. And yet here it is. So when fear arises towards end of life, or before that, existential terror, like when I thought I was dying of COVID, when I thought I'd thrown a big blood clot and my vitals were crazy and I went to urgent care, I didn't want to lose my kids. I didn't want to lose my wife. I didn't want to lose the story because the story was this beautiful thing. But I knew on a deeper level, I'm like, nothing dies. Where could I go? There's no real death. And yet, I allowed myself to feel the fear absolutely fully as another gift of this human existence. So fear will arise. And I think the most difficult thing sometimes we can do is judge ourselves for being afraid. Oh, I'm not supposed to be afraid. I've done, I go to church or I meditate or I know it's just all awareness. And if fear is what's arising, that's what's arising, then that is the perfection of this moment. Who are we to say it could or should be otherwise? I'll tell you who we are. We're the ego, thinking it can be otherwise. It's a process, this ego. So when that relaxes, oh, you're so welcome, Pamela. Yeah, Project Daydreams. Amen, amen. Peace, comfort, and discovery. Yes. Let's scroll back a little. Janet says, yeah, so what's up with all these people testing for positive for COVID recently? Well, as even the CDC has finally said, it's endemic. I've been saying this for a while. So it's going to be with us forever. So during the summer when people go indoors, there's new, very contagious variants. It's going to spread like wildfire, which it does. It's a contagious respiratory virus. And we just have to learn to adapt, learn to live with it as we have. You don't see tons of people wearing masks. You don't see tons of people social distancing. You just don't see that unless you have risks, which then it's appropriate, or you're sick and you put a mask on to respect others. That's great. But otherwise it's like, live your life. I wasn't surprised when I finally got it, but I was surprised at how my experience was so similar to so many others. Cause I thought, there was this bit of hubris, right? A little bit of arrogance, like, I'm pretty healthy. I'll brush this thing off. And it's like, I I did, and then it got worse. Like they say, it can. And why was I surprised? Let's see here. Now, this annoys me. Tommy Gunn, remember when you pushed those shots so hard? Are you going to wear a mask again? Like, Tommy, do you listen to what I say? Actually, when did I push shots so hard? Go back and watch the videos. I said, if you are unvaccinated, have risk factors, getting the first series of 2 and maybe even the first booster is probably a good idea to prevent severe disease. That's what I advise my parents to do who are elderly with comorbidities. And when they got COVID, they did fine. That's not to say I can prove that the shot did it. I'm saying that was the data with the shots, prevention of severe disease. When did I say otherwise? When did I say, oh, everybody go get a booster, everybody go do this every day? But people seem to light up the comments, and it's usually people who are on the political right, who think the whole thing's a pandemic, who have heard someone say that Zubin said this, but they never actually watch my videos. Like I'm sitting here with Vinay saying, why are we giving boosters to kids? Why are we, we're questioning all these things and asking for data to show that it helps. And we're questioning, well, what is the incidence of myocarditis in young people? Does that offset the benefit in young people? Having these discussions. So what shots was I pushing? I got 2 shots when it came out and the 3rd booster, mostly to try to protect my parents in the month I got the booster, because there's a feeling that with high antibody levels, you're less likely to be as infectious or to get infected at a high viral load, et cetera. And this was back in 21. Those were my shots. So where has this been pushed? And yet this keeps coming up, which makes me think people bring the spin of their own bias to everything they watch, everything they hear, because we're so polarized into these camps, the COVIDians and the COVIDiots, right? And it's taken on a political spin because Trump and the Democrats both were taking this particular position. Trump will never wear a mask. The Democrats wear 5 masks. Trump, actually fast-tracked these shots, but then he's like, well, the Democrats really like these shots, so I'm not going to talk about the shots much. It's like, come on, guys. Can we just realize that everyone's partially right and everyone's partially wrong about this? And we also don't know a lot of shit. Can we admit that? So, let's see. Blonde Twin. If you have a newborn, would you recommend spacing out vaccines or all at once? It seems like a lot of viruses all at once to process versus one at a time. So this thing about childhood vaccines comes up a lot. Like, should I space out shots? Should I not? And you got these, you have a lot of regular pediatricians and authorities that'll say there's no need because the standard dosing of vaccines exposes you to antigens, right? These things. But in your daily experience, newborns are exposed to all kinds of antigens. And they'll say, well, but they're not exposed in an IM way, an intramuscular way. They're exposed through natural stuff. But from all the sort of the autism thing and all that, it's been looked at, right, extensively. And they have not found a connection between these kind of things and the standard vaccine regimen. Now, the danger with spacing, okay, so you could go space them out. And some pediatricians will say, I'd rather you do that than not vaccinate. And I agree 100%. The danger with spacing out is that these vaccines have kind of been studied in these series. If you space them out, you create a window where infection is possible, like measles in particular, right? And yet my feeling is, well, look, if people are more comfortable spacing them out over a couple of more visits, great. But I think the doctors that are pushing that saying, oh, this will keep you safe, I think they have no data to support that at all. So let's be honest again about what we know and what we don't know. Let's also be practical, and let's be sensitive to parents' own concerns and instincts. Like if their instinct is, well, I'm really uncomfortable with this, then why would we pound on them and say, no, you're an idiot. You don't know any of this data. Take them all at once. It's like, why? Okay, so there's a slightly increased risk of getting a disease that's actually rare because most people are vaccinated, measles or something like that, pertussis, whatever it is, because you've spaced it out. But you ended up getting the shot as opposed to getting really pissed, contracting and saying, I don't trust any of these people. I'm not going to get any of these shots. And then going down the internet rabbit hole, listening to RFK Jr., who is a complete moron when it comes to vaccines. He really is. And look, he may be right about a lot of other stuff, but he is absolutely wrong about the childhood vaccine schedule, and has been from the beginning when he's taken up this issue. So, but people will listen because they're already off-put by doctors telling them it has to be this way. It was the same with COVID. And this was me and Vinay's like big thing, is like, public health messaging sucks. This is not how you, why am I forgetting her name? Monica Gandhi. With Monica, she was saying, look, I'm an ID doc. During the 90s and the 80s, when we were treating HIV patients, we didn't tell them you have to wear a condom and you have to do this and shaming them. That didn't work. We said, okay, here are the kind of pros and cons, and here's what probably makes sense, but it's up to you, and then sitting with them and making these informed decisions. That's how public health should be done. And yet, we didn't learn any of those lessons for COVID, or even for childhood vaccines, honestly. And now there's all this resistance to even the childhood schedule because of our missteps with COVID in public health. So, it's really quite gray and nuanced, this whole practice, and yet everybody seems to treat it as this black and white thing. And Risa makes a good point. The anti-vax camp then also lumps in vitamin K, which isn't a vaccine at all. And I know you've addressed this before, but big push around here lately, sad. So Risa is a NICU nurse, all right, in Utah. People come in because now they've been radicalized against vaccines. And after, a newborn is born, we inject them with vitamin K. And I did a specific video about this. Vitamin K orally is poorly absorbed. But subcutaneously, or however they give it for newborns, I forget whether it's IM or sub-Q, Risa can clarify, it's absorbed quickly. Now, why is this important? Because often they have a deficiency when they come out, and it can lead to catastrophic brain bleeding that can either lead to lifelong debility or death. What's the downside of giving vitamin K? 0. So we do it routinely for every newborn. And yet now parents are saying, I don't want it, because they're misinformed. They're misunderstanding the risk because they've been misled. That's it. It's simple as that. And yet, so are you going to shame them about it? Are you going to say, well, you're a terrible parent for not doing this? No, you're going to recognize they've been misled, recognize that public health should do a better job about teaching about this, and then try to teach. Hold their hand, say, well, if it were my kid, and I did have a kid, they get it right away. Right away, they get it. So, you can make your decision, but here's why we do it. Here's why you may misunderstand the risk of it, and go through it. And align with what their instinct is telling them, which is there's something dangerous about this, right? So go, yeah, I get it. I could totally see, as a parent, you're a brand new parent. The emotions are high. All of it is there. The hormones are going crazy, both for the male and the female. And, that's just how it is. So, and Health Nut says it's because they think the additives are toxic, if there are any. And I think we addressed that in the video. I forget exactly what the, formulation of the vitamin K is, but in our vitamin K video, we talked about it. I don't want to say anything that isn't correct because it's been years since I made that video and I haven't thought about this. Jan says, my comment came out as gibberish. I would tell them to try and finish some of the things on their bucket list and make sure they made amends to the people with their loved ones, etc. Oh, you're talking about the end of life thing, I think. Yeah. We're not talking about vitamin K. So 979 says, our public health is creating viruses, though. How do you trust them knowing that now? But wait, what? So maybe you're talking about like the funding for gain of function mutations and that kind of thing, with the controversy about the Wuhan lab and Fauci and all that. But then saying public health is creating viruses is not, that's just, now we're getting into conspiracy land. Because I know a lot of public health people, and that's not it. So how do you trust them knowing that now? Well, so even when they are studying gain of function mutation, which I think is a dangerous idea, right? And we've talked about this. Marty McCary's come on the show. We've talked about this. They're doing it to try to figure out how to manage the treatment of viruses. And by giving them certain genetic changes, you're able to study that. But the danger of that, obviously, is obvious, right? So that ought to really be a practice that goes bye-bye. Bye, Rose. Tommy Gunn says, who left the comment earlier about the vaccines, the boosters and all that, I think. I can agree that those are real vaccines, and had my daughter get all of them. It was crazy when the government was talking about going into schools and giving COVID vaccine to kids without parents. Yeah, I agree, Tommy Gunn. Like, we agree on this. Like, the way this was done, children are generally low risk. Doesn't mean they're zero risk. I think there are kids, I think certain kids will definitely benefit from having at least the first couple vaccines, because kids do die of this. They do get MIS-C. There are conditions, this multi-system inflammatory syndrome, but I would never mandate it for kids. And I would never do it without parental consent, because again, these children don't have agency. And look, it's different now. You could argue for the childhood vaccines, this is different, because unless we have 96, 94% herd immunity vaccine for measles can break through because it's so contagious. And that can cause conditions that actually extend into the teen years, an inflammatory syndrome that can show up later. We've talked about this, as well as complications for the children themselves. Varicella, chickenpox, same thing. Like, these are diseases that used to hospitalize tens of thousands of kids every year. And since vaccines, it's a huge benefit. So you could say, well, since it has ancillary effects on other children, you can mandate it, or you can't come to this public school without a medical excuse or whatever the hell it is. But so that's one thing. But COVID, no way. There's just no way. Like, everybody's been infected too. So they have this thing called natural immunity, which people were denying existed. The government was saying, oh, what? Natural immunity? No, it's a thing, right, Tommy Gunn? So it's like, now we alienate everybody and we turn people into anti-vaccine advocates because we won't express common sense and truth. So I'm with you on that. Chris says, coming to your area next week, Berkeley freshman drop off. Let's get coffee. I love it, Chris. Let's get coffee, man. Email me or gal. I can't tell by the thumb because it's tiny. My kid did the summer camp at Berkeley. That's where she got COVID. And she had just a great time. It was super challenging for her. And I got to go up to my old alma mater and hang out. And yeah, man, it's Wokistan, but also it's not. It's the same Berkeley I was at, man, where it's like there's a diversity of thought. Believe it or not, we think universities are cesspools of the extreme liberal agenda. And to some extent, yes, there's a groupthink. But I'll tell you, you talk to the kids and they're like, they got all kinds of diversity of thought. So I'm still a believer in the university general model. Yeah. Has it gotten really monolithic? Yeah, to some extent it has. But even a place like Berkeley, like, I'm surprised at the diversity of thought. Wokistan. John says, you tried to debunk What the Health, but you didn't do it with data. Milk the Vegan debunked your poor response to the show. You were a good source of info during COVID, but you failed to present data. So John, the What the Health video we did was it was more an emotional response that I had to a poorly scienced documentary. So What the Health, look, they may be right about vegan diet. Like, that's fully possible. But the way that the data they presented and the way they presented it was so unscientific and unhelpful. And it's going to bias people towards all documentaries seem to do this. They just cherry pick data. They have fake experts. They do all the things that happen with poor science. And they were doing that. So when I went through, I tried to give the balance of, well, actually, what about this? And what about this? And you're right. I didn't go citing a ton of studies. So I did a shitty job of that for sure. But it was more to point out what a shitty job they were doing. I don't have the answer. Like, I wasn't saying, well, go on a keto diet, or you better put meat in your diet, or carbs are the enemy. Like, I wasn't saying any of that, or maybe I did. I don't remember. But if I did, I apologize, because that's not that. Then you better give fucking great data. What I think I was trying to convey is nutrition has become like religion. It's become like, it's about my belief in my identity. I am a vegan, or I am an omnivore, or I am a carnivore. And then you're fighting other people to defend your own identity. And so you're going to do shitty science. You're going to pick, actually, okay. So let's talk about this. And I haven't looked at the primary data, so I'm just spitballing here. But, recently the FDA did not approve MDMA as a treatment for PTSD. because it was this company that was promoting it with the help of MAPS, this psychedelic organization. And they'd done this study and they had all this data and they were like, it's great, it's working great, it's always wonderful, look at this, and pushed it to the FDA. Now, here's the thing. They understandably are zealots about this therapy, ecstasy, MDMA, Molly, whatever you want to call it, for PTSD. Do I think it's helpful? Undoubtedly, because I've experienced MDMA and I've also seen it work for others. Could I say I could cite really good data and design a good trial to test it? No. That's why you need scientists to do it well. And what seemed to happen in this case, and again, this is early and I may be misinformed. What seemed to happen is you have the zealots running a trial through a company they've set up, and they're pushing it to FDA. And because they're zealots, because they already know this thing works and they're going to get it through and help a lot of people, God bless them, right? They did shitty science. They didn't put in data for adverse effects for certain patients who then the FDA went and interviewed and they're like, oh, I had this horrible experience and I had this side effect that they didn't talk about and all this other stuff. And FDA then looked in the data and was like, this is not great science. So they said, we can't approve it based on this shitty science. So maybe we shouldn't have zealots doing the science. We should have scientists, really good scientists. And maybe there were really good scientists, right? But the whole thing was biased. Now, you could say, well, fuck, isn't that what pharma's done this entire time? And the answer is yes. That's why Vinay will question the efficacy of drugs that have FDA approval. He'll say, why the hell did this get approved? Well, because pharma put a ton of money in it and they hid their shitty science, hid their shitty science way better than the poor MAPS people did for MDMA, because they're actually incentivized by wanting to help people purely rather than a profit motive that I could tell. Because it's not, how do you patent something that's just readily available? So that's my take on that. You're welcome, John. I appreciate your comments. Anyone in the comments know how MDMA compares to ketamine? Is it the same drug class, Blonde Twin? Not at all. They're totally different. MDMA it's not even really a psychedelic. It's more of a empathogen, and it has amphetamine-like qualities. So there's a speedy kind of quality to it. Ketamine is an anesthetic in a completely different class. It can have these psychedelic effects, but it's a dissociative. So you actually can feel like there's no body, there's no time, there's no space, there's just awareness. You can experience, traumas when the body does come back. You can process these things, but it has its own downsides. MDMA is like this heart-opening empathogen where you can sit and re-experience these traumatic events with a capacity to hold them with love. And it's a very different experience, but it has downsides too. And you can get serotonin syndrome and you can get hyponatremia. These are idiopathic reactions that can happen. So all of these things are drugs with potentials, upsides and downsides, where you have to screen patients for the best fit and so on. And it's true of all psychedelics as well. So I'm a believer in using these things therapeutically, but I'm also a believer in making sure people understand risk benefit. And it's done in a supervised situation by professionals. Yeah. Okay. I actually have to go. I realize I gotta take my kid to her back to school barbecue that's happening. I want to say something about you guys. The comments here, like even the ones that are like mildly antagonistic, which I love, by the way, have been really wonderful. Like, what a great discussion we get to have. You guys are thoughtful, you're direct, like Instagram. I am really impressed. Project Daydream, we'll talk more about the dying process. Thanks for that feedback. So I love you guys, and I think these conversations are helpful because they're two-way, right? Yeah, thanks. So do me a favor. I'm actually probably going to put this on YouTube and Facebook. If you're on those platforms, leave a comment, like it, share it, because it helps the algorithm get it to people. On Instagram, after it goes, so this is live, after we put it up, come back, leave a comment, like it, because that helps Instagram's algorithm to share it after the fact. You may be here for the live, there's 100 and some odd people, but getting it watched on the replay requires that algorithmic boost. And it just means if you care enough that you want to leave a comment, please do. Yeah, that's it. All right. I love you guys. Thanks so much. Whoa, there's my daughter saying, where the hell are you? And multiple texts. And we are out. Peace.